I had we had looked at Saul and David and Samuel a couple months back, and I did not get to the end of this just because of time and everything else. So hopefully in this class we can get through. I'm going to go relatively fast. Sister Lee, I don't want to recap desperately, but we can't do that. So let's get into it. These first slides are taken from 1 Samuel 17, very famous, obviously, story in Scripture, one that has inspired a lot of people. It certainly has inspired the Jewish people, and it should inspire us as well. So, you know, we have it set up here in the 17th chapter of 1 Samuel. You know, it's a long chapter, a lot of detail in it, but it's really the focal point of it. You could say a turning point in David's life, right? Remember, he's going to be anointed by Samuel in Bethlehem. You know, Samuel didn't even know that he was around, right? They had to get him from the field. He was watching the sheep. He was just a young kid, probably 16, 17 years old. He's anointed by God, and from that point on, you know, David is going to have an incredible reliance on God, and an incredible relationship with Him as well. And it's going to help him in this situation, isn't it? As we're going to see. So, great story. David, a young boy of 16 or 17 years old, going up against this mighty warrior. You know, massive, right? You know, depending on how you look at the height and how you kind of, you know, what a cubit is, that type of thing. He was any place from like 7 feet to 10 feet tall. Okay. And there have been bones when they've kind of dug up archaeologically. They have found warriors, you know, like 6'11" or 7 feet tall with their armor and everything else from this area. So it's certain, you know, obviously it happened. It's just that there's, you know, I've read a lot of different stuff on how tall, you know, Goliath was. At the end of the day, let's just say he was really big and really scary, and he was a problem, wasn't he? So let's take a look at the 17th chapter of 1 Samuel. First verse, the Philistines are going to gather their armies to battle, and they're going to, at Shokol, which belongeth to Judah, and pitch between Shokol and Azekah and Ephes-Dammim. And then they are in verse 2, they're in the valley of Elah. So you have one side, you have the Philistines on one side, you have the Israelites on the other side. They're kind of up on the hills, watching each other. And then in the valley of Elah, this is where the battle is supposed to take place. And so every day, Goliath goes down, and he presents himself to the Israelites. And he takes guys, right? Now, this coincides with the historical record of this time period. And I'll give you an example. How many people know the Iliad? Right, by Homer, right? Mm-hmm. Very old, very ancient piece of writing. The Greeks, right? They go and they fight the Trojans, right? And the battle ensues, and there's this great story about it. But remember, and I don't want to get too much into the story, but there's a couple times when this happens that one warrior or one hero presents themselves to another hero. I'll give you an example from Homer. Paris, who is the younger brother of Hector, remember he stole Helen and brought her back to Troy. He was going to have a one-on-one fight with Agamemnon, right? He was a leader of the Greeks, but Paris kind of chickened out, and Hector had to come in and save him and everything else. So that's exactly what happened. Then Hector and Achilles are also going to fight as well, right? And Hector actually is going to die, and then Achilles does what with his body? You want to remember? No. Oh, you know? You kidding me?
I what you're talking about.
This is outrageous. What are they teaching you in school?
It was 35 years ago.
Remember, he's gonna tie Achilles. He's gonna tie Hector's body to his chariot and go around the city, right? So, anyways, this really fits very closely to the attitude of battle back in the day. Okay, where you had your two heroes fight, and whoever won, you know, they inspired the other side, or in some cases, the battle was done, right? If your hero beat the other guy's hero, well, they won, and now you have to live with the consequences. Anyways,
So we're not going to read all of these verses, but in 3 to 11, it kind of gives a description of what we're dealing with Goliath of Gath, right? He had a helmet of brass upon his head, and if we get into this a little more detail, there's a lot of symbology in this, right? The head of brass, armed with a coat of mail. Everyone knows what a coat of mail is, right? It's not necessarily armor, but it's metal little links that are interchanged together to prevent arrows and to prevent strikes from either swords or in some cases hatchets or whatnot.
Or sharks.
Or
Sharks.
sharks as well. You actually do see them with sharks on. That's right. With that when they're doing. So this is, I like this in verse 7, and the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, right? So he's got this giant spear, and he's covered in head to toe with mail. Like, it's like, you look at this guy, and you're like, this is how are we going to kill this guy? It's impossible, right? He goes out, and what does he do every single day? What does he do? What does Goliath do every single day?
He taunts the people.
He's taunting everybody, right? He says, why are you come out to set your battle in array? Why even bother fighting, he says. Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down if he's able, right? And he says, listen, if we kill you, if we kill your guy, then you're going to be our servants. If you kill me, we'll be your servants. Ha, ha, ha. Not going to happen, right? So verse 10, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. And so let's look at verse 11. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Right? So this is what they call today psychological warfare, right? Goliath, every single day for 40 days, he goes out and he is taunting Saul. He's taunting the armies of Israel. And they are scared to death. They're looking at this guy and his big booming voice, and he's covered in head to toe. He's like a super weapon, right? So anyways, David is not at the battle originally. He's probably too young to be at the battle. Okay, I think it was 20 years old and upward that they counted the soldiers, right, in the law, that if you were 20 years old and upward, you went to battle. So David was obviously, it seems like, because he wasn't at the battle for whatever reason, he was younger than that, 17, 18 years old, right? And so for 40 days, Goliath is going to do this all, again and again and again. Let's see, can we turn? Here we go, okay. So David brings provisions. I think he brings cheeses. Let's see, verse 19. Verse 19. Actually, in verse 17, Jesse, his father, says, go to your brethren, because the rest of David's brethren were actually there, and they were fighting. And so Jesse's like, hey, bring all of these provisions, not only to to your brethren, but to everybody else as well. And so this is another thing that we don't think about, logistics of war. It takes a lot of time, number one, to kind of put everything together like this. But remember, all of these people, these thousands and thousands of people, these soldiers, they need to be fed, right? Every single day they need to be fed. And so oftentimes, in the ancient world anyways, these battles happen very quickly because you wanted to get it over with. Because war was obviously not only destructive, to the people fighting, but it was also destructive to the economy as well. If you have a majority of your men fighting for a long period of time, well, they're not back, getting the crops in. They're not planting. They're not taking care of, business in the cities, that type of thing. So it had a direct negative effect on the economies of both countries, both the Philistines and in Israel. And so we can see that logistically already, in my mind anyways, Israel is running into problems because it's lasting a long period of time, 40 days, right? Every day you've got to feed these guys. And so I think they're running low on food. They're running low on provisions. So now Jesse, being a man of means, he was most likely wealthy, he's sending food not only to his brethren but to other people, okay, to kind of help the war effort. The United States did this, right, in both World War I and World War II, where any extra metal that you had or anything like that, you would send in, and they would recycle it to build bullets, ships, guns, all that kind of stuff, right? And you were rationed, that type of thing. So it still happens today. Anyways, I just went down a rabbit hole. Anyway, so David in verse 26 says, why is no one fighting this guy, right? David is young. He's got a lot of zeal. He's first of all, too, he's kind of just new to the battle. He hasn't heard this guy for 40 days, right? And David isn't afraid at all. He's like, well, how come no one's standing up to this guy? It's ridiculous. He's making fun of the king. He's making fun of us. He's blaspheming God, right? It was an affront to David. And so David spake to them, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine and taketh away the reproach from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Now, this kind of tough talk by David didn't really sit well with his oldest brother, right? Eliab, his older brother, heard that what he spake in verse 28. Why comest thou down hither, and with whom hast thou left the few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the haughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. So he's saying, David's just coming down here for his own personal gain. He's, and I think there's a lot of resentment on Eliab's part, isn't there, right? He's the eldest, right? And he gets passed over for the youngest brother, right? That would be like me getting passed over for like Nathan or Ben. Like, that's Casey, come on. It's ridiculous. It's outrageous. Who do I speak to? All right. And so, David says, hey, I'm the guy. I'll go do it right now. God's on my side. Let's go. I'll go out. And so if we look at, we're not going to turn to this, but you can look at it. David, Saul's like, okay, we finally got a hero. Great. And, little David comes walking out. He's like, I'm ready to fight, guys. And and so Saul's like, okay. Rachel, I probably should have said there's no kids down. Rachel, there's no kids down. So Saul gives him his armor, okay, which kind of makes sense. All right, you're going to go fight this guy? Well, you need some armor. You can't just go out there, right? Now, what was the story here, right? It didn't fit David, right? Armor actually has to be made to fit the person. And so, they would do a lot of measurements. The blacksmith and the armor maker would do a lot of measurements, particularly in the chest, because you usually wore kind of like a heavy, like almost blanket, right, that had like a lot of like thick stuffing in it, and you would put that over first, and then the armor would go afterward, or your chainmail would go on. So you had two layers of protection. Now remember, not everybody is wearing armor, by the way, in the ancient world. Okay, this was really just for the wealthier, the nobility. Mostly the nobility wore the armor, or if you were a really good fighter, they would give you the armor. The rest of the guys maybe had a shield or something like that. Didn't have a whole lot of armor. Anyways, it doesn't fit David, and David says, "Listen, I can't." He said, "No, this is interesting." He goes, he's talking to Saul, right? And Saul, in verse 33, and Saul said to David, "Thou art not able to go against the Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth." So Goliath has just been, he's been practicing and practicing and practicing war. He's been in probably tons of battles, killed a lot of people. David hasn't done anything. But, David has a lot of self-confidence, right? Because he knows that God is with him. And he tells Saul this. He says, "Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock. I delivered them," in verse 35, "out of their mouth. I caught him by his beard and smote him and slew him," right? So you just think about the courage of David, right? Going up to a lion, has grabbed a lamb and it's got it in his mouth. David goes up and stabs her, right? Incredible. I've killed lions, I've killed bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God, right? And so you can kind of feel the zeal of David when he's speaking to Saul like this, right? He believes in himself. He believes in God. I'm going to take care of this guy for you, Saul, right? And so he put, in verse 37, he puts his trust in God. He puts his trust in God because he knows that God had been with him in the past when he was protecting his father's sheep against the bear and against the lion. If God has protected me then, he's going to protect me now. And so, listen, we could do a whole exhortation, brothers and sisters, on the spiritual lessons of David versus Goliath. But, the biggest thing is we've all faced Goliaths in our lives, or we're going to face Goliaths in our lives. Challenges, obstacles that maybe in our mind we can't, I don't know if we can. But David should be an inspiration to us, right? He trusted in God. He had faith in God. And he had faith in his own abilities because he had faith in God as well. And so I think there's a lesson there. When we confront difficult situations in our lives, whatever they are, we should obviously put our faith in God, but have confidence. Have confidence in the abilities that God has given us, that God is with us, and that we can overcome. Not just by ourselves, right? We don't do things by ourselves. We do things with the help of God and with the help of each other. So remember that. All right, so David won't fit into his armor. Yeah, verse 38. Armed David with his armor, and he put on his helmet of brass upon his head. He also armed him with a coat of mail, right? But he says, I can't. I haven't proved them. They don't fit me. And so David, besides doing, he puts the armor away. In verse 40, he takes his staff in his hand. He chooses 5 smooth stones. That's always been interesting to me. Not that 5, I don't know. Maybe 5 represents something. I don't know. I don't want to do that. But they're 5 smooth stones. Why do you think he chose 5 smooth stones? Anybody?
Probably fly faster in the air.
Yeah. I think it's like a physics problem, see? Right? It's like, very smooth stone. So I think he put it, it's flat, and so when he does that, it cuts through the air quicker, so there's more velocity to it, and we're going to find out, that's what happened, is David's going to shoot, and pow, right in the middle. It says that the stone, right, it's sunk right into his forehead, right? And so obviously that's going to do some damage. It's not, yes? No? Questions? No. Okay. He's definitely going to be in concussion protocol right after that, without question. Okay, so he's going to choose 5 smooth stones. He's going to put them in his bag, and he's going to go up, and he draws near to the Philistine. I wonder what David's thinking, right? He's like, oh boy, maybe he's like, what did I get myself in for? Me and my big mouth, right? So now this is where the rubber hits the road, right? All the talking is behind him. But he goes and he takes 5 smooth stones, right? He just didn't take one, by the way, brothers and sisters, right? It's like, listen, if you trust in God so much, just take 1 stone. Well, that wasn't David's mentality, right? He knew that God was going to help him, but he also prepared. He prepared himself to be as effective as possible, It wasn't like, 2 stones, no, 3 stones, 4. No, I'm going to take 5 stones. I got to hit this guy with 5 stones. He's massive, right? Come to find out, he didn't really need the 5 stones, right? He just needed 1. Anyways, he goes, the Philistine looks at him with disdain. Goliath looks at him with disdain in verse 42. For he was but a youth and ruddy and of fair countenance, right? And so Goliath says, am I a dog that you come to me with staves? You don't even have any armor. This is ridiculous. This is the best you have. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Ooh, right? So David responds in verse 44. The Philistine, Goliath says, come to me and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. This has got to be a pretty scary situation, brothers and sisters, right? Where David, 17, 18 years old, is now going up against just a super warrior, right? Head to toe covered in armor. He's been fighting since he's been 4 or 5 years old. He's trained for this. And David's just a shepherd. He's got no armor. He's got a sling and he's got 5 smooth stones, right? Doesn't even have a sword. Doesn't have any weapons of war. But he had this incredible confidence, this incredible trust in God, and that is going to come out in his words here in verse 46. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite you and take thy head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. You know, David's a pretty good trash talker, right? Goliath is giving him the business. David gives it right back to him, right? Oh, you're going to give my body to the fowls of the air? I'm giving your body to the fowls of the air. And listen, you know, he's not saying that all the earth may know about David, the great warrior, right? He's saying that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. He's already given God the glory, right? And so that's where David's heart is. That's where David's mind is, right? And so verse 47. Now this is a verse I think we should remember, okay? He says, and all the assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. Right? The battle is the Lord's. And so we should remember that in our lives as well. The battle is God's. David didn't go with a sword and a spear, a shield. He didn't have any of those things. Goliath had all of those things. But God gave the victory to David because of his courage, because of his faith in God. Goliath in verse 48 is going to come towards David. David is going to put his hand in his bag. By the way, 48, what does it say there? He says, David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine, right? So not only is David there, he's running. He's running towards the Philistine. Most likely to kind of cut the distance, right? So that, you're cutting down the distance. It's harder, obviously, to hit a moving target. But the closer you can get with the slingshot or with the sling, the more impact you're going to have when you hit him as well. And it's going to help with accuracy as well. He takes the hand, he puts it, and he slang it. It's a great word, slang it. Verse 49, and smote the Philistine in the forehead, and the stone sunk into the forehead, and it fell upon his face in the earth, right? Just poof, right? And he's going to take his sword. There was no sword in the hand of David in verse 5, so he's going to take his sword, and he's going to take Goliath's sword and hack off his head, hold up Goliath's head. Everybody goes crazy. Israel comes down off of the hills, and there is a massive rout of the Philistines. And this is really going to put the Philistines back on their heels for a period of time. And they're going to want revenge because of this as well. And this is why there's going to be, in the Battle of Mount Gilboa that we're going to look at, this was the Philistines' kind of revenge against the Israelites for killing Goliath. Because up to that point, remember, the Philistines were in complete control of this situation, and they were the dominant force in this area. There was a verse I think we looked at that there was no blacksmith in Israel, right? They had to go to the Philistine blacksmith in order to sharpen their field instruments, their farming instruments, right? And the only people that had swords at that time were Jonathan and David, like the elites. And so there wasn't a whole lot of weapons of war in Israel. That's how bad it was. But they used whatever they had. Here's David using a sling, right? You use what you got. And the majority of these soldiers from Israel most likely did not have weapons of war. They had like maybe sickles or some type of sharp instrument that they would use on the farm, and they would use that. Questions, comments? So there's going to be a massive rout. Israel is going to be victorious, and from that point on, where's David going to live? Does he go back to his father in Bethlehem? He's going to live with who? Saul, that's right, yeah. He's going to go into the household of Saul. He's going to become a member of Saul's house because of this great thing. What was the reward, by the way, for the man that killed Goliath? Anyone remember?
A wife.
A wife, yeah, the wife of Saul, right? Michal. And that's actually, Saul's going to be a man of his word. David and Michal are going to be married. It's going to start off pretty good, but it's not going to end very well, is it? Okay. We talked about this, verbal exchange, slingshot, boom, knocks him unconscious. Yeah, so that last one here, David's fame is going to spread like wildfire after this, and then there's going to be some real tension now with Saul. Samuel had told something to Saul that weighed heavily on his mind, I believe. What was that? Remember? You remember what was told by Samuel to Saul? What was going to happen to his kingdom? What's that, Jimmy?
Taken away.
Yeah,
To another.
that's right. Given unto another, right? And so this is, you're seeing after this event, right? Saul's paranoia is really ramping up. Okay, and I think personally that Saul, suffered from some type of mental illness, right? They call it, what did the Bible say, an evil spirit from the Lord? And what calmed Saul during these times?
Music.
David's music, right? And that's actually scientific, by the way, right? Particularly people that, struggle with, like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia as well. Music does tend to calm some of the impulses, right? You're filled with anxiety and rage. Depending on the music, it can calm you down. And so David's there with his harp, right? And he calms. David go in. He's having a tough day, right? And so David goes in and he starts, and Saul just kind of calms down. So that's an intimate relationship, though, brothers and sisters, isn't it? When we think about that, where David is inside, the king's chamber, right? And he's playing music for him. And so Saul, I think, generally loved David as a person. But he, as we're going to see, he struggles with this. He's like, is David going to take my kingdom? What am I going to do about this? Because remember when they came back from one of the, the battles, the skirmishes with the Philistines, what did they say about David and Saul? Saul has slain his thousands and David, woof! Okay, and Saul's like, wait a minute here. So this tension is going to continue. Understandable, right? So let's look at, Samuel 18. The soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would let him go no more to his father's house, right? And so Jonathan and David are going to make a covenant together. We're going to be lifelong friends. I love you. You love me. And there's this close relationship that Jonathan and David are going to have. Even to the point, Jonathan stripped himself of his robe that was upon him and gave it to David, and in his garments, even his sword, to his bow, and to his girdle. So these are very precious things, very symbolic things. Jonathan is giving his royal robe to David. Most likely it was purple, okay, the robe that Jonathan had. Remember that purple in the ancient world always symbolized nobility, royalty, wealth. And the purple dye was very expensive during that time. Did I ask you this question? Anyone know how they made the purple dye? History nerd time. Okay, I know you guys want to find out. What's that? What? Sister Lee from the rafters. All right. Yes, correct. She's heard me say this. So yeah, they used to take snails that on the Black Sea primarily, okay? They were found in the Black Sea. And they would take these snails and grind them all up, and kind of like the mucus and everything. They would use that to dip the cloth in, and it made this purple, very, very vibrant purple. So yeah, made from snails. And the Phoenicians actually would make this dye, and this is one of the reasons why the Phoenicians, they traded everywhere, but they also became very wealthy because all of the wealthy nobility across the Mediterranean ancient world, they wanted to be strutting around in their purple, right? Lydia. That's right, a seller of purple. That's right, and so that was pretty lucrative, by the way. It wasn't like she was just some kind of low seamstress or something like that. There was a lot of money to be made in the making of purple dresses, purple robes, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. That's a good connection, Sandy. Thank you. Yeah. All right. Verse 5. David went out whithersoever Saul sent them. So he's a loyal soldier, he's a loyal servant, and behaved himself wisely, and Saul set him over the men of war. And he was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. What a fairy tale ending, right? He goes from just being a shepherd boy, he kills Goliath, and now he's in the household of Saul. Everyone loves him. He's been made a war chief by the king. It's great. What more could you ask for, right? Well, we're going to find out, like in a lot of things in David's life, the ups and downs of David, right? He's up top right now. What could possibly go wrong? This is fantastic. I'm the son-in-law to the king. I'm married to the king's daughter. My best friend is the king's son. Untouchable. Got a great life in front of me. We already talked about, they came out in verse 6 after they came up from the slaughter of the Philistines. The women were dancing and singing. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s, verse 8. And Saul was very wroth. And the saying displeased him. Verse 9. And Saul eyed David from that day and forward. Oh boy, right? And so Saul, he's always looking at David with suspicion, right? Because he's looking at David as somebody that quite possibly could take his throne. So there's a lot of underlying politics with this, right? Saul to David is a threat to the stability of his reign, the stability of his house. Let's see. Yeah, and so verse 10, and it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house. This, by the way, brothers and sisters, is not the first time that Saul is going to prophesy, right? Remember when he went to find his father's donkeys, he went up with the prophets as well, and he prophesied with them. So there is definitely a spiritual side to Saul. There's definitely a love of the things of God here, right? Because he's prophesying. But it sounds like that when he has these bouts of depression, these bouts of paranoia, that he tends to kind of prophesy during these times, but also there's a very dark side to that as well, because he becomes extremely suspicious of not only David, but of everyone around him, right? In the midst of the house, and David played with his hand as other times, right? And so when you're around the king like this, and when you're around with someone that suffers from mental illness, you become very in tune to kind of triggers or markers of the king's having a bad day, right? I remember I worked with somebody at a job, one of my bosses. And I knew when she was having a bad day. She had suffered a stroke and she kind of coming back, but I knew when she was having a bad day, just depending on how she held her arm and some other things, right? And so you kind of get in tune with that. And so, I'm sure Saul's ministers go into him, and you know right away if you're going to have a bad day. Sister Lee's shaking her head. She's like, oh, yep, we know. And so Saul has a javelin in his hand at this time. Now, why would Saul have a javelin in his hand if he's just in his house? Like, you're in your house, you're in the palace. Why do you think he had a javelin in his hand? Like, he's got a weapon with him at all times. Like,
unstable.
Okay, unstable, yeah. I think that tells us that he was in a state of heightened paranoia, right? He needs a javelin because people are out to get him, right? There's enemies all around. Saul can't trust anybody. Have to have my javelin here at all times, even though he most likely had bodyguards all around him. Again, it's a little insight into the madness of Saul, into the mind of Saul. And Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it, right? Now, there's another thing, too, is David, by the way, escapes, right? He escapes a couple times, avoided out of his presence twice. So imagine after the first time, David, Saul throws the javelin at him, he miss, and then they're like, hey, David, he's having a bad day, you got to go back in there again, right? It's like, well, wait a minute, he just tried to chuck a javelin at me, and he does it again the same time. So, there's a heightened sense of paranoia, and so Saul obviously wants to kill David. He sees David as a threat, and so what a really stressful situation for David. Think about it. He's a young kid. He obviously has, talent as a musician. Excuse me. He's got talent as a soldier as well as a war chief. But just think of the anxiety that he would have and the stress that he would have. He's like, I got to go into Saul again. He's going to try to kill me, right? And so this is kind of the beginning of that. All right. Any questions on this? So, a lot of tension. David is going to play the harp to soothe Saul's troubled mind. And then, Saul's depression and his paranoia are going to continue to grow, and he's going to do everything to try to eliminate David. And we're not going to look at it, but in this 18th chapter, Michal actually works with David to help him escape from Saul. Remember, she put like an idol or something inside of the bed to pretend that David was sleeping, and David takes off out of the window, see ya, and goes on the run. David is now going to be an outlaw. And all of the other kind of outlaws in this region are going to kind of go with David, right? He is going to become the leader of this group. I think it's 600 men, and they're going to live out in the wilderness. David's an outlaw. So he goes from having everything to having nothing. Okay? The ups and downs. Do we find in his Psalms, can we find these ups and downs in David's lives in the Psalms? Yeah, we can, right? I think there's a certain amount of comfort in that, brothers and sisters, right? David is going to have these ups and downs, and he's going to write about them in his songs. We're going to have ups and downs in our lives as well. We have ups and downs in our lives. It's part of life. If we think that we're going to go through life without any problems, we're delusional. Everybody is going to go through trials and tribulations. We're told that. The thing with David is he never lost his faith. He never lost his trust in God. He never allowed the circumstances of his lives to affect that close, loving relationship he had with God. And because of that, he was rewarded eventually with the kingship. When do we end around here? Jim, I want to be in compliance.
Yeah, right now.
Right now? Okay. All right. Anyways, let me just go. I want to go through very quickly here. He's going to flee. He's out in the wilderness. He's going to fight. Now, Samuel is going to die. And then finally, Saul has no contact whatsoever with God. God has withdrawn communication with Saul. And he's, just imagine this, right? You're used to having some type of communication with God. You have some type of, manic, depressive, whatever, bipolar, whatever it is. On top of that, you have paranoia. God's not directing you anymore. So he makes the decision to go to a medium, to a witch, right? And, this is where he's going to see Samuel. Now, do I personally think that the witch had powers to raise up, Samuel from the dead? No. I think that God, allowed Saul to see Samuel, and it freaked him out. It actually freaked out the witch of Endor as well. It's like, whoa, my eye of Newt just worked. And then, lastly, Saul and his sons are going to die on Mount Gilboa. So just think about it. Really, the whole line of Saul is going to be wiped out except for Mephibosheth, right? David is going to show kindness to them. But David's going to really write a very moving psalm or song about the death of Saul and Jonathan. So that's it. That concludes our talk. Yes, any questions? Sandy?
Just curious of when Saul became such a hero, David became such a hero in Saul's eyes, to when he started to despise him. Was it before he was married to his daughter? It just seems like, you just read it, it's a chapter. I'm curious of time length.
I think once the people said, Saul has slain his thousands, 10,000, which was before he was married to Michal, that's when Saul was really eyeing him with suspension. I'm keeping my eye on this guy, right?
I think it was years.
Yeah, I would say that once they came back and David began to kind of grow in the eyes of the people, I would say maybe, a month as he began to prove himself to the people, Saul's like, yeah, this guy's an asset. He's really good at what he does, but I'm keeping an eye on him. He wants my job. He wants to be king, And I think a lot of it was very, it was irrational, right? But you can't reason with somebody that doesn't live in reality. All right. Questions, comments?